you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is Bruce McGuire.
And Maxwell Powers.
And JR.
And we have a special Thanksgiving episode for all the listeners out there today. The Thanksgiving Conspiracy. There's a lot of conspiracies, but the Thanksgiving one doesn't really get talked about as much for some reason. And we're going to be going pretty far out there in discussing the ins and outs of the background of Thanksgiving. What is history? What is myth? And everything in between. So if you have time to take a break from watching football or stuffing your face with turkey, you can enjoy this podcast. If you like,
don't forget the Rose Parade, Bruce.
What?
Don't forget the Rose Parade.
Oh man,
The hell's a Rose Parade?
this is already off to a great start. If you like our podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification to get updates when we put up new podcasts. And check us out on social media: Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and Patreon. Just check the description. Okay, let's get down to it. So once again, this is not to bring anybody down or to go down these crazy dark rabbit holes with deep conspiracy, a day with your family,
which will inevitably happen, Bruce.
Well, of course, this is my thoughts, but
before we start, let's gather what everyone's ideas are, like their personal thing. Like, do you guys?
Let me finish the intro, Maxwell.
Okay.
So any day with your family in a time of giving thanks for all you have, that's a great day. I mean, people should do that every day. And if you don't, and you only do it on Thanksgiving, good for you. At least you do it that day. It's a good thing. A lot of people
once a year is not bad.
A lot of people don't really get a chance to spend quality family time together other than the holidays. So we're not saying the holidays are a bad thing in any way. Holidays, the holy days, it's just, I think, a logical approach using historical fact and separating fact from fiction and devil-worshipping bastards and how they operate. And, Maxwell's favorite.
Well, I mean, Bruce, before we talk about devil-worshipping bastards, I would like to give the government's angle here for a second. First of all, Thanksgiving is the #1 domestic violence day of the year because families get together, the whole family, and the vino starts flowing, and the next thing you know, the cops are called because there's a domestic incident. So in terms of the government standpoint here, the Thanksgiving, which is when we're supposed to all come together as a family, is the #1 domestic violence day of the entire year. It supersedes every other holiday, including Christmas and any other religious holiday.
Well, you're really putting a damper on this podcast, JR.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there. Like that's fact. That's not classified or anything. Like that's just fact. I mean, and like anybody that works in the law enforcement community, please chime in because that's actually what's going on Thanksgiving.
Any thoughts about what JR just said, Maxwell?
I don't know. My Thanksgiving has always been peaceful. Maybe a couple arguments, and that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, but have those arguments ever reached a level where, the popo were called?
No.
Is it customary for a government agent, even if you're just some kind of park service janitor, to call the police the popo?
You know what? We're speaking to the people here. Like, we're not. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different names it's called, but in this particular podcast, it's the popo.
So Maxwell's had a pretty peaceful Thanksgiving history, I guess. Now that you mention it, I do recall seeing all these news reports about really crazy things happening on Thanksgiving. But to be fair, I remember that on Christmas and every other holiday as well, especially Black Friday. Black Friday has a very dark history with violence. And do you want to chime in on that, JR?
Well, that's where the people, they believe they're getting a deal from, these extrasential organizations, which is kind of ironic because a lot of times, especially with the stores, they're beholden to the manufacturers who set the, standard bar of the lowest price they can offer on a product.
Well, let me throw out the Black Friday conspiracy for those who don't know. All of the old inventory basically gets put on sale for Black Friday. It's very rare. There's very rare deals where you're actually getting a real deal. Cyber Monday is really the way to go. But
Well, I mean, besides Cyber Monday, I mean, come on, Bruce. Like, I mean, let's just be, honest here. Like, the corporations and, for the various entities are pretending that they're getting a deal when, in fact, most products that are sold on Black Friday, and including Cyber Monday, have already been discontinued by the manufacturer.
well, actually, I actually there's even better deals on the New Year's deal. I believe the either the first or last week of January is statistically.
Is there ever really a deal, or is it just an extrapolation of the pack mentality?
Well, yeah, it's probably a lot to do with that as well. But let's get focused. This is not a Black Friday, Cyber Monday podcast, although we might have to do one now that we've teased.
Yo, this is like we're like one day out. So I mean, come on, like.
All right, so Maxwell, you want to give the background of the holiday, and before we get into the deep dive into conspiracy land?
Well, I just know the socialist capitalist angle on Thanksgiving Day and what happened there, and this article that I'm gonna read articulates it really well. So,
all right, so quick background: the Pilgrims in America. The what we're taught in school, in elementary school. So the Pilgrims, apparently these European settlers in the 1600s, they didn't know how to farm, and this guy Squanto and the Wampanoag natives, he helped them, and they survived. And that's pretty much the story. And they feasted together and gave thanks for everything. So let's get into the dark history. So first of all, Squanto.
Well, first of all, Bruce, let's just after they learned how to farm, they vaporized all the Indians.
They didn't wait to learn how to farm to do that. But let me just give a quick background on Squanto. He was actually sold into slavery and then returned to the New World. He was sold into slavery. He was actually a Christian.
So he was like Ben-Hur, like he went full circle.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, I'm not quite sure why this isn't common knowledge. I guess it doesn't quite fit the narrative.
Was when he was sold into slavery, was his number 41? I'm just asking. Like, I mean, like, I'm famous for like going off topic, here, Bruce. I mean, I know that like I'm probably distracting, but like I'm just asking, like, he was his number 41.
I don't believe the slaves had numbers like that. I'm not quite sure on Native American.
Well, they did in the Roman Empire. So I mean, like, why didn't they in like this particular empire?
I'm not sure, but here's the deal. So he was part of the Patuxet tribe on the western coast of Cape Cod Bay. He was kidnapped by English explorer Thomas Hunt in 1614. He was brought to Spain and sold into slavery. He escaped and finally got back to North America in 1619. He returned to his village to find that it had been completely wiped out. And the details of this are very shady. Some people say it was an unintentional smallpox outbreak. Others speculate that it was part of the biological warfare used against the natives to wipe them out off the entire continent. Any thoughts on that, JR?
Well, I mean, biological warfare is like clearly, like, I mean, that's something that like predates the modern age of government. It's been used, multiple times. If you were to read several books, I mean, even before the German population supposedly euthanized the Jews, the Austrians had a long heritage of, putting people in ovens. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, it's possible that could have been the case.
Maxwell?
wait, I missed it. Sorry.
Maxwell Army. So he was kidnapped multiple times, and he went to England where he learned English and was trained as a guide. Then when he came back, he actually was kidnapped again. This guy's been kidnapped multiple times.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, what's up with him being kidnapped like multiple times? Like, I mean, like,
Well, he escapes, and then
after you're
he gets.
kidnapped the first time, like, I mean, isn't there like some sort of like,
I'm not like it's kind of hard to find the real history of Squanto because I'm not sure how much of this was
I mean, like, let's
Christian.
look at him as a
How
human
much of it?
being. Isn't there self-preservation involved? I
Well,
mean, like,
it's kind of rough because if you come back home and find your whole village exterminated with not a single survivor, where does he rectify his
it's
native?
like Luke from fucking Star Wars. I mean, like, like, what the fuck? I mean, like, like,
Well, he seemed to
like,
he seemed to join the
you,
dark side because he I don't know if it was some kind of Stockholm syndrome where he was converted to Christianity because there's actually a lot of history on the conquest and colonization of the New World that isn't really spoken about, even without diving into deep conspiracy.
well, I mean, like, what's up with that colony in Virginia that like existed but didn't, but like did but didn't? Like,
We'll
yeah.
get to that. That deserves its own podcast. You know that, Jr. But yeah, no. Supposedly, it wasn't necessarily. Yes, in some cases, it was for religious freedom, but there was also they wanted to spread Christianity quite violently, the same way as the British did to the rest of the world, where they went around and genocided natives and told them that their religion and history and thousands of years of way of life was wrong and their modern interpretation of Christianity was correct. Once again, we're not going to go into the whole Bible thing and the
But I mean,
apocryphal text.
weren't they still kind of like following the British tradition there, Bruce?
Yes. Yeah, the colonists were basically following the British tradition. And yeah, they wanted to spread Christianity. Now, without going into really, really crazy conspiracy land, because I know Maxwell and his quite extensive knowledge of economics wants to chime in on how the colonial way of life was impacted with different economic systems. So I will actually let Maxwell take the floor now with that one.
I'm just gonna read this article because he just did a really good job and it's real concise. It's by Richard J. Maybury. He wrote it in November 27, 2014, entitled "The Great Thanksgiving Hoax." So this is his article. Each year at this time, school children all over America are taught the official Thanksgiving story, and newspapers, radio, TV, and magazines devote vast amounts of time and space to it. It is all very colorful and fascinating. It is also very deceiving. The official story is nothing like what really happened. It is a fairy tale, a whitewashed, sanitized collection of half-truths which divert attention away from Thanksgiving's real meaning. The official story has the Pilgrims boarding the Mayflower, coming to America, and establishing the Plymouth colony in the winter of 1620 to 21. The first winter is hard, and half the colonists die. But the survivors are hardworking and tenacious, and they learn new farming techniques from the Indians. The harvest of 1621 is bountiful. The Pilgrims hold a celebration and give thanks to God. They are grateful for the wonderful new abundant land He has given them. The official story then has the Pilgrims living more or less happily ever after, each year repeating the first Thanksgiving. Other early colonies also have hard times at first, but they soon prosper and adopt the annual tradition of giving thanks for this prosperous new land called America. The problem with this official story is that the harvest of 1621 was not bountiful, nor were the colonists hardworking or tenacious. 1621 was a famine year, and many of the colonists were lazy thieves. In his History of Plymouth Plantation book, the governor of the colony, William Bradford, reported that the colonists went hungry for years because they refused to work in the field. They preferred instead to steal food. He says the colony was riddled with corruption and with confusion and discontent. The crops were small because much was stolen both by night and day before it became scarce eatable. In the harvest feasts of 1621 and 1622, all had their hungry bellies filled, but only briefly. The prevailing condition during those years was not the abundance the official story claims. It was famine and death. The first Thanksgiving was not so much a celebration as it was the last meal of condemned men. But in subsequent years, something changes. The harvest of 1623 was different. Suddenly, instead of famine, now God gave them plenty, Bradford wrote, and the face of things was changed to the rejoicing of the hearts of many, for which they blessed God. Thereafter, he wrote, quote, any general want or famine has not been amongst them since to this day, end quote. In fact, in 1624, so much food was produced that the colonists were able to begin exporting corn. What happened? After the poor harvest 22, writes Bradford, they began to think how they might raise as much corn as they could and obtain a better crop. They began to question their form of economic organization. This had required that, quote, all profits and benefits that are got by trade, traffic, working, fishing, or any other means, end quote, were to be placed in the common stock of the colony. Quote, all such persons as are of this colony are to have their meat, drink, apparel, and all provisions out of the common stock, end quote. A person was to put into the common stock all he could and take only what he needed. This, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, end quote, was an early form of socialism, and it is why the pilgrims were starving. Bradford writes that, quote, young men that were most able and fit for labor and service, end quote, complained about being forced to spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children. Also, the strong or man of parts had no more in division of victuals and clothes than he that was weak. So the young and strong refused to work, and the total amount of food produced was never adequate. To rectify the situation, in 1623, Bradford abolished socialism. He gave each household a parcel of land and told them they could keep what they produced or trade it away as they saw fit. In other words, he replaced socialism with a free market, and that was the end of the famine. Many early groups of colonists set up socialist states, all with the same terrible results. At Jamestown, established in 1607, out of every shipload of settlers that arrived, less than half would survive their first 12 months in America. Most of the work was being done by only 1/5 of the men, the other 4/5 choosing to be parasites. In the winter of 1609 to 10, called the starving time, the population fell from 500 to 60. That's a lot. Then the Jamestown colony was converted to a free market, and the results were every bit as dramatic as those at Plymouth. And that was that.
So
That
your
was
So,
your
I
basic
mean, like,
thoughts on that is just communism doesn't work. Is that where you're going with that, Maxwell?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's pretty much what happened. Like they came to this land and they started this commune and they just couldn't decide who was to work and so Bradford just set up this system where you know what this part is your land, you do whatever you want with it, you can work, you can, and he just divided all the land. He set up a private property order to the community, and what happened was they stopped starving and they actually had excess supply and they started trading to with other people. So that's what happens in the free market.
So Maxwell views Thanksgiving as proof that free market capitalism is superior to socialism. What are your
Yes,
thoughts, JR?
well, I mean, like, my thoughts are a couple of things, Bruce. First and foremost, this is basically like people's temple, but like they're allowed to keep their crap. So, I mean, like this is a situation where, like, basically they're starving and they're dying. At some point, the empirical leader decided, hey, like, you can trade your shit to live. The other part of this is almost, I mean, I know Maxwell can appreciate this because he brings up movies a lot. This is almost like the Addams Family Values, where Wednesday enacts Gary's vision and decides that, she's going to enact Gary's vision after being grossly entombed in this empirical process of deciding that, I mean, she's not involved in this whatsoever, but she's affected by Disney, and then all of a sudden, she wants to deal with this. This is bullshit. I mean, like, this is a classic example of basically imperial European leadership imparting on the people before there was actually a Democratic Party, saying that there was a Democratic Party, but there really wasn't, but there was, but there wasn't. So, I mean, I don't really...
Is that an accurate take on your position, Maxwell?
No, I don't know what he said, but that's not it.
Keep in mind, I'm a firm believer of Maxwell Army, and I've also purchased a T-shirt before others. So, yeah.
You got the pre-order in, JR?
Pre-order, like, like, I fucking expect a T-shirt, and I expect it to be fucking hand signed. So I mean, like.
All right. So let's get down to the conspiracy angle. So the common belief is that the turkey picnic feast in Plymouth in 1621 is what everybody is celebrating. But is that really the truth? So the record of the national holiday, that's pretty easy. That was Abe Lincoln. He set aside the last Thursday of every November, as a national day of thanks.
Before he was blown away by his opponents.
That's an interesting choice of words.
I'm just saying. I mean, like, like it wasn't exactly like, he just chose this like FDR and then like, rolled away in his chair as like, a victor of American people. He was blown away, and then his body was stolen.
This is not
after
an Abe Lincoln,
he was buried.
This is not an Abe Lincoln assassination conspiracy podcast.
I'm just throwing it out there, Bruce. I'm just
okay.
saying.
So the October 1863 proclamation actually pays homage to the almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and restore it to full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and union with a capital U. So
after the government euthanized the people that did this for them.
Yes. So in this proclamation, is there any mention of colonists, Native Americans, Turkey, football? I mean, it's basically, he's basically creating a holiday to marking the end of the Civil War. That's really what it was about. He's not talking about some kind of feast in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, is he? So here's where the conspiracy comes into play. Are we really celebrating, for those that do, the 1621 feast or the 1637 Pequot Massacre? So in 1637, on May 26th in Mystic, Captain John Mason raided a Pequot fort, killing 700 unarmed Pequots, including women and children. And they just torched the entire fort. And we're not going to go into the specific details of all that, but so depending on which account you read, so these armed men supposedly actually waited until the hunters of the tribe left to go hunt with their spears and bows and arrows because they were too scared, a couple dozen hunters, and then they only killed the unarmed people and women and children.
So, I like how we're going into like the unspecifics, Bruce. Like, I mean, you sound more government oriented than I am.
Well, because that's not the point here. The details of the massacre aren't the point. Here's the deal. The next day, Massachusetts Bay Governor William Bradford designated, quote, a day of thanksgiving kept in all the churches for our victories against the Pequot. And this massacre is described in quite terrific detail in his own history of Plymouth Plantation. Quote, it was a fearful sight to see them frying in the fryer and the streams of blood quenching the same, and horrible was the stink and scent, he wrote. But the victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and they gave the prayers thereof to God, who had wrought so wonderfully for them, thus to enclose their enemies in their hands and give them so speedy a victory over so proud and insulting an enemy. So, okay, so are we going into the devil worshipping land now where all of these demons and archons? Did you go for your archon screening yet, JR?
I'm not at liberty to discuss my archon screening.
Okay.
But I will let you know that I did contact my physician.
So basically, to the extreme conspiracy theorists, making this a holy day of worship, of a genocide, of a bloody massacre, is it, like, where do you see that? I mean, not to mention, a lot of these natives were sold into slavery. They were, smallpox wiped them all out, and depending on what you believe, whether that was intentional
or they were
not.
raped, or like, their babies and children were stolen and like, forced to like understand Christianity. But I mean, like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, the 1614 pilgrims arrived in the colony where there was only one Patuxet native left, and that was Squanto, and he survived slavery in Europe, New English. So he taught them to grow corn and to fish. And he also negotiated peace treaties with the Wampanoag Nation.
Let me ask you a question, Bruce. Like, like if he knew that, like, his entire, basically not even his populace, but like his entire belief structure and everything else associated with it was vaporized, why do you think he chose to like deal with them?
I don't know. I'm thinking there might have been some kind of indoctrination, maybe some kind of roots of MK Ultra that the Illuminati of Sumeria were utilized in their domination of mankind. Are we going down that rabbit hole, Jack?
I'm just asking. I mean, like, think about it. Like, your entire population was vaporized. I mean, that's almost like, like if we were going to ask the ancient Vikings, why would they deal with current day Republicans? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that far out.
I really don't know. The victors write the history books, so we can't even take any of this as concrete in any capacity. However, let me just finish the story. So Squanto's help to the colonists, word spread about that. So more people came to the New World. So not exactly by design, but Squanto actually contributed to the annihilation of the Native American peoples of North America because of helping these pilgrims and helping them survive. I mean, it was probably inevitable anyway, so it's probably a moot point. But in any case, Squanto actually did not negotiate any peace treaty with the Pequot.
But we're also talking about, like, as if Squanto was, like, a normal person. I mean, suppose Squanto, like, suffered from some sort of psychological condition or was feeble-minded. I mean, like, would he be responsible? I mean, we've all seen the movie 300, right? What about that guy that, like, wants to hold the shield up?
Yeah, we don't know. A lot of these colonists and explorers, they viewed this so-called New World as public domain. So there was a lot of settlers, and they just stole land left and right, and they just killed natives indiscriminately and sold others for slaves. An important point here is the Pequot Nation did not agree to any treaties with Squanto, and they fought back.
Well, I mean, you know what? Another point, Bruce, is the guy that said you're fired on NBC is now, like, running the actual land that's stolen. So, yeah.
Thank you for interrupting me with that.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, like, like, to our viewers that, like, you're interested in, like,
I'm pretty sure
like, from the primitive politics to the modern day politics. Like, we've gone from
I'm pretty
Abe
sure they know.
Lincoln to FDR to, the Apprentice program. So, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm pretty sure they know who the president is. But anyway, the Pequot
I'm
War.
just, I mean, like, maybe they don't.
Okay, maybe they don't.
I mean, because, is he really the president?
The Pequot War was one of the bloodiest wars out of all of the native wars. So here's what makes it even darker. So 1637, and this is around Groton, Connecticut. The Pequot tribe had their annual Green Corn Festival, which is basically modern day Thanksgiving. And during this festival, right before dawn, English and Dutch colonists surrounded them and basically shot and clubbed to death all of whoever came out, and they set the entire settlement ablaze, and everyone else was burned alive. So it was almost like they hijacked this Green Corn Festival and turned
Well,
it
I mean,
into,
like, Bruce, like, we all know they came in, they took the Indians' knowledge, and then they euthanized them. But, like, let me ask you a question, and I know I'm interrupting you. I apologize. Where does the turkey fit into this?
Yeah, can you wait until I finish the damn
I'm
point?
just asking.
Yeah, can you ask that after I finish the point?
I'm just asking.
Yeah, why don't you ask that after I finish the point?
I mean, because, like, it needed to be made now and not later.
I think it can be made later. So
I think it's pertinent now. What do you think, Maxwell?
Maxwell Army. Maxwell, you there?
It can be asked later.
Okay, Maxwell chimed in. All right, so he wants to get to the turkey later. We'll get to the turkey later. So, and once again, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony declared this a day of Thanksgiving because 700 unarmed natives, including women and children, were just slaughtered and murdered indiscriminately. So that's not the end of the story. So these colonists continued raiding other villages. So they were basically blood drunk with all of this murder, and they just went around slaughtering village after village. And so supposedly women and children over 14 were sold into slavery. Everyone else was murdered. And these Native American slaves were loaded on boats and they were sent to the Caribbean and other areas of the world as slaves. So it's not normally talked about, don't know why, but yeah, Native Americans were sold into slavery as well. And the whole scalping situation, bounties were paid on Native American scalps. So they were, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me with the amount they were paying and the amount of scalps there were, but they were basically trying to get colonists to kill as many Native Americans as possible and literally paying for their scalps. And so, yeah, there were many of these raids. And one of them actually is very, very dark near Stamford, Connecticut, against the Pequot. The churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the natives. And during this particular feast, the decapitated heads of the natives were kicked through streets like soccer balls.
Oh, so
And
it's like Iran.
yeah, and so even so, Thanksgiving, the celebration of the treaty with the Wampanoag and all of that, their chief was actually beheaded, and his head was impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and it stayed on display for 24 years. So this is the tribe that so-called was in this peaceful treaty that Squanto negotiated with the Massachusetts Bay Colony that our modern version of Thanksgiving is. That chief was beheaded and impaled. That is what the celebration is. So, and it gets even darker. There were more, after each massacre, they held Thanksgiving feasts. So all of these colonists are going around just basically indiscriminately killing all of these Native American people and feasting after these massacres. Does these sound like DWBs, Maxwell?
I don't know about DWBs, but it was that's really brutal
Yeah,
and
that's
mean.
messed up. So George Washington actually, because there were so many Thanksgiving feasts after so many of these massacres, George Washington introduced the idea that Thanksgiving should just be celebrated one day instead of after every single massacre, because that's just too much.
Yeah,
So another interesting point is the day that Abe Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War was the same day that he ordered troops to attack the Sioux Native Americans in Minnesota who were starving and couldn't fight. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like it sounds like standard government procedure, if you ask me, Bruce.
That's messed up. That's messed up.
I'm throwing. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, like like that's standard procedure. I mean, like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? So I mean, like here we are, like we're managing a country. It's on the birth of, like whatever. But like we need to make sure that like it's actually viable. So let's euthanize the other population that doesn't believe in what we're talking about in the press. Sounds very current, if you ask me, Bruce.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. It's pretty dark.
Well, I mean, like when you look at the scope of the government, Bruce, it's pretty dark. So, I mean, like, yeah. By the way, like, like what's going on with like? Let me ask you a couple of really stupid questions for our viewers, because I mean, what about green bean casserole? Was that part of the original Thanksgiving?
I think Maxwell is more apt to answer that
I'm
than
just
I.
asking. I mean, like that's it's a classic dish. I'm just asking.
Oh man.
So anyway, back to the conspiracy. So it looks like, judging from this material, once again, the victors write the history books. But if we look at the Pequot people and these bloody wars and massacres and the act of celebrating a massacre of killing women and children and unarmed men with feasting, what does that do to your current version of Thanksgiving?
Well, I mean, Bruce, if I could, I mean, because Maxwell is, like busy, like, contemplating a real point. If I could just say, when I placed my hand on that piece of paper and I drew that turkey as a boy, with my hand, I feel confident that as a U.S. citizen that something was being accomplished.
Which was?
I was a part of the movement.
What movement?
Well, I mean, like Bruce, when we think about it, like when we came to this country, we didn't know dick about anything, and we weren't able to farm the land because we didn't understand it. And
What do you mean we? What do you mean we? I wasn't around back then.
Well, I mean, when I say we, I'm talking about like the general population of the United States government. I mean, I guess that's my own condition, just being conditioned from saying we, because we talk about we a lot within the federal government. But we understood the land, so then we euthanized the people that own the land, so we became the owners of the land. I mean, isn't that the way it works?
I suppose that all depends on your viewpoint, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that that's my viewpoint. I'm saying that that's what actually happened.
What do you think?
I wasn't around then. I mean, we're talking about the 1600s. I mean, like I'm not pretending to like, be a part of that plan. I'm just saying like it with current government strategy, it seems that strategy existed back then. I mean,
Maxwell,
really,
what
do you think, Maxwell?
Can you summarize what you said?
You just did.
So basically, do you think that current government principles of owning the land, building walls, euthanizing people that shouldn't be here, do you believe that existed in the 16 to 1700s during the initiation of our country?
Yes.
Okay.
Some of the darkest theories kind of view all of the New World as kind of a blood sacrifice for these Illuminati conquerors coming to create a new world order in the new world. And that the price was the blood of all of these millions. By the way, some numbers range of up to 130 million Native Americans were slaughtered over the course of 200-300 years of conquest. Maxwell, no thoughts on this DWB action?
Well, I don't think it's devil worshipping bastards, but it's because they were.
We're not going to go into the whole Columbus. We're not going to go into the whole Columbus conspiracy, but
well, I mean, like considering that, like almost all of the actual like active tribes that quote unquote worked the land and had like rights to the land were euthanized, and then the few that did remain under the Jackson administration, went through the Walk of Tears or the March of Tears, and were like sent to land that they didn't even fucking have anything to do with.
It was a trail of tears.
Yeah, but like they didn't have any like I mean, we're talking about like organizations that like they moved X miles, so like they didn't even have any rights to that land, or it wasn't even a part of their culture, but were quote unquote relocated after. I mean, like we're not talking about like the deaths that occurred within those populations. Because after all, Jackson specifically said to the United States, courts, when the courts ordered him to let the Indians live, his remarks were, "With what army?" Yeah, like I believe that like this is almost within our own time. I mean, we've come full circle.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw in a quick teaser to our Altered History podcast series that Maxwell and I do, which, by the way, you should join us on, JR. It's pretty interesting. There are some that theorize that part of the old world order, or the lost or forgotten kingdom of Tartaria, possibly also Atlantis, it was a worldwide civilization and it existed in the New World. And there's actual documentation from Native American tribes that there were light-skinned rulers of a technologically advanced empire that lived alongside them. And some people theorize that the reason it took so long to conquer North America versus South America, which was conquered much quicker, was because these native tribes had some kind of alliances with a technologically advanced empire that has been erased from history. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole on this podcast because it's mostly about Thanksgiving. But quick teaser, we will be getting into that in our Altered History podcast.
But what's up with the turkey, Bruce? I mean, like, cough of the goods. I'm just asking. I mean, it's Thanksgiving. I mean, we have green bean casserole. We have the turkey. We have the stuffing with, whatever, sage. We have the mashed potatoes with turnip. Cough up the goods. It's Thanksgiving. It's not about the fact that we care about anybody else. We care about ourselves and fulfilling ourselves with food. So, where is that coming into play?
Well, all I got for you is this. In 1947, the National Turkey Federation presented a live turkey to the President of the United States prior to each Thanksgiving. These turkeys were slaughtered and eaten for the President's Thanksgiving dinner.
So it's basically a very dark Groundhog Day.
So you can thank the National Turkey Federation for creating this custom of Turkey Day.
Who created the Federation? I'm just asking. I mean, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just
Who created the National Turkey Federation?
Well, I mean, it seems very specific. I mean, turkey. I mean, it's not like we're not talking about the National Fowl Foundation, where it has to do with chickens and capons and turkeys and so on and so forth. It just seems very specific.
The National Turkey Federation. The National Turkey Federation.
Who did they donate to?
The National Turkey Federation's website is actually eatturkey.com.
Yeah, I mean, and pork is the other white meat, Bruce. But where did they come from?
It's a very good question. I guess they had better marketing schemes than some of these other federations.
I mean, what's your beef? I ask you, Bruce, what's your beef?
Don't you mean what's your turkey?
Well, I mean, I'm asking you, it's very interesting that, suddenly, this, conglomerate of, I mean, it kind of sounds like Valentine's Day, where, all of a sudden, Hallmark and other organizations create Mother's Day. I mean, what's going on with...
You hit the nail on the head with that one. This all seems like some kind of just scam for turkey farmers.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, it sounds a little commercial to me. I mean, where's Squanto when all this is going on? I mean, he was probably tied to a stick and burned alive, because after all, I mean, after he served his purpose. So I mean, what's going on with the turkey?
Any thoughts?
I want to know. I mean, I have to buy a fucking turkey every year. I mean, I've got kids. I got mouths to feed. There's explanation. I mean, I got fucking, drawings on my refrigerator with little hands and shit. With the feathers and shit.
It looks like money just changed hands with this National Turkey Federation to make
it's basically Big Farm without being Big Farm.
Yeah, I guess they just beat out all these other federations to get the monopoly on which type of food is eaten in Thanksgiving.
So let's go deeper. I mean, what's the difference between buying a Purdue turkey and then buying a store-bought turkey that's frozen? Let me ask you a question, Bruce. I mean, do you buy fresh or do you buy frozen when it comes to Thanksgiving? Do you buy fresh or frozen? I mean, that makes a difference. I mean, you even see it on TV commercials, fresh or frozen. I mean, what do you do?
Right,
I mean,
let's wrap
wait. Let me just throw it out there. Do you buy ham instead of turkey?
So let's wrap up this podcast with everybody's thoughts on, is the real history important in the scope of celebrating a national holiday? And is your celebration contributing to the remembrance of genocide and celebration of genocide? And how does it all, what's the interplay with all of this? And where do we go moving forward? Is there a benefit to knowing this information? Or should just we remain in ignorant bliss of the true origins of Thanksgiving feasts?
Well, I think personally, before I go before Baxwell, because I'm sure he has a better answer than I do. I'm just saying, I I think that like we probably should, but we don't. Like I think that like there's a history there, but like ultimately we don't give a shit about Indians burning in hell. We don't give a shit about like people burning at the stake or people being shot. We care about the food and the appetite.
JR, like be a little bit more accurate. Instead of saying we, just refer to the masses. If you're referring to the masses, refer to the masses.
Okay, so let me rephrase that for like your podcast. The masses don't give a shit about like Squanto, Indians, being burned at the stake, having anything to do with any kind of like like starvation. They care about feeding themselves and the appetizers, which they fill up on before they get to the turkey and the actual like main ingredients, which are Thanksgiving.
Maxwell?
Um, I think I think it's very important to learn about the real history of Thanksgiving. And I think we should continue the tradition the way it is now because it's fun and it gets families together and it reminds us to be thankful and be grateful to what we have. So
So you're saying
uh,
both. So you're saying both.
yeah, so do both, but I think having this, I kind of like it where where people are gathering together as families and I post some crazy stuff about the real Thanksgiving.
Keep
Kinda
keep in mind, Maxwell. Keep in mind, if this was 200 years ago, you'd be gathering with pitchforks, getting rid of the Indians in order to like sustain your Thanksgiving.
yeah.
It's kind of
Um,
strange.
So,
It just all of these conspiracies are just so strange and insane. Like, what are they really celebrating? They were celebrating theft and murder and kind of a dishonorable way to survive as
well,
opposed.
I think I mean, Bruce, I mean, if I could be quite blunt here, I mean, like, again, like, like as a government worker, I think they were celebrating the fact that they won and they lost. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
But
that's what it is. I mean, like,
but at that
they
point, the
learned
war.
the farming. They fucking cultivated the meal. They had them come to the meal and they were executed. I mean, it kind of sounds like a little bit like John Gotti. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm throwing it out there.
Well, I also think there is a DWB aspect where you're kind of worshiping to worship the devil or demons. You're worshiping death and destruction and celebrating it, celebrating the bloodshed almost as a blood sacrifice, and it's kind of dark. It's pretty dark. I mean, I also agree with Maxwell that any occasion that you celebrate with your family that you might not get a chance to otherwise do so is good, but I also have a weird issue with government mandated national holidays. It's just kind of strange how the mind control manipulation of the masses works, where basically the government decided that businesses would be that you just
Well, I
normally.
mean, the government decided so you wouldn't worry about all this other stuff about people dying in Quanto and whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's
one final point I want to make is for all the Christians out there, gluttony is a sin. And to indulge in all of this food and drink, and it almost seems like it's Thanksgiving would be a sin. I mean, how many people stuff themselves silly and then they can't move and they just relax on the couch and watch football? Is that not gluttony?
I'm one of those people, Bruce, and I can say that like I carry no guilt.
So you would say you're not a Christian, or
I'm a Christian in quotations, but I mean, like, like religion in my book is limited to, like when people pass very quality food in front of my face. I mean, like I'm not one of these people on Food Network where I'm willing to like, get into the kimchi and all this foreign shit. But that said, like when it comes to Thanksgiving, it's pretty down home, and I don't.
well, even in and this isn't just against Christianity. Even in Judaism, of the 613 commandments, excessive eating or drinking is number 169.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I'm part of 160 whatever, where like like it's acceptable.
Maxwell, what do you think of that? Of the parallels to gluttony and it was seemingly Thanksgiving being in under the umbrella of gluttony?
And before you answer, I will eat the portion that, like, if you reject the idea, like, for you, on your behalf.
Well, I don't understand the gluttony, the term. So like,
It simply
it's,
means excessive eating or drinking, overconsumption of food.
and then that's supposed to be a sin, right?
Correct. So you're not supposed to stuff yourself silly. If you got to undo your belt and lay down on the couch after your meal, that would pretty much fall under the umbrella of gluttony. Whereas on a normal night,
That's why we created Pepto, because, like, it specifically says in the bottle for overindulgence of food. Like, I don't have a problem with this issue.
well, here's where the dark side of the conspiracy comes in. If for the people who have a whole lot of tinfoil on their head, if this is all basically some kind of demonic worshiping holiday and you're engaging in gluttony, you're engaging in celebrating slaughter, even unknowingly. I mean, Maxwell's done some research on this as well. Symbolism is one of the main ways that the so-called Illuminati or the archons or whatever conspiracy branch you want to associate, you believe in or are looking at as possibly being true, it's kind of you're giving your energy in that direction. You guys don't want to touch that one?
The archons can have it. Like, I like fucking Thanksgiving. Fuck the archons. Like, my doctor is responsible for moving them. I have Medicare.
Or to
seriously.
Maxwell, I'm going to add my 2 cents to this, which is if you know the truth and you're actively against gluttony, the slaughter of innocents, the celebration of bloodshed, theft, pillaging, slavery, if you're against all of that actively in your own brain, and you know about it and you know the real truth, then you're not directing your energy to that negativity, and you can focus. If you know the real truth, you can more honestly focus on the positive of just family time and giving thanks for what you have, and separate that in your brain from the government mandated holiday and everything that goes with the negative side of it.
It's almost like I'm almost like, now that I think about it, I'm like, man, it might be good that we were fed this, this so-called official story of Thanksgiving, but because it's so like happy and like, like
Yeah,
most
but
people,
but
it's
that's again, and once again, for people, I'm not a Christian and I don't view the Bible as the word of God. Although, since I don't know for sure, I'm not saying it's not either. I am undecided on many things because I think there's not enough information to make definite decisions. And utilizing logic, it's very difficult to say what the real truth is for sure without falling into fallacies or dogmatic thinking of some fashion. However, the Bible does say the devil comes in the name of good. Believe none of what you hear, and only half of what you see.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, Bruce, food trumps religion and the fucking Bible. So, let your fucking viewers, call me out on that.
Well, the viewers can decide for themselves. So, whatever you do on this day, do what you do and take this information as it is. But we hope you enjoy your day and whatever you do with your time on this day. And we hope you enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast. If you like our podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification for updates. And also, if you like this podcast or any of the other podcasts, feel free to share them across social media so other people can check out the podcast as well. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
and Maxwell Powers.
And they are dabbing out.
We'll catch you guys next time.